My name is Joe Ann Williams. I was born Valentine Day, 1954, to Joe Jackson Williams and Christine Richardson Williams. My father's parents were Native American. My dad told me that they came down the Yalobusha River, which is in Grenada, Mississippi, where I live and grew up. And they ended up on some white man's land. And they took the white man's last name, which is Williams. This was off in the woods east of Grenada. And eventually my dad and his grandfather bought the land out there. I don't know how much. My dad just told me he and his granddaddy had bought some land. But I remember a picture of the house. It was just a plain wood frame house. It seemed rather large. I don't know if we lived there with my dad's parents and his granddad or what, but I think they did live out there somewhere, because down the road from us was one of my uncle's house. My grandfather and his brother. As far as I know, it was just the two of them, and then my great-grandfather. But I know we drank spring water, because I remember a spring, and I think my dad took me with him a few times to get the water. We moved into the city of Grenada, if I'm not mistaken, before I entered elementary school. And Dad told me that, now my grandfather, my great-grandfather died before we moved to town, because, like I said, I never did know him. He may have died before I was born. But my grandfather, I think, had already moved into the city. But Dad told me that after we moved to the city, someone would come to him and tell him that he needed to go check on his land, because his uncle was selling it. And this happened twice. And the second time, my dad said he went, my uncle told him that my great-grandfather had told this particular son to go to the courthouse and have the land put in our name and fix it so it would never get into anyone else's hands. But my uncle actually went and borrowed money and used the land as collateral. And my dad said he found out from my uncle that the payment for the land each month was more than he actually made. So they eventually just took all the land, which didn't belong to him. It belonged to my father and my great-grandfather. So we ended up losing that land. And my father always had good jobs, but he was not a good provider. My mother had to clean house for this white couple, and I eventually ironed for them when I got old enough. And my mother's, I don't believe I mentioned, but my father side of the family were Native American. He said, if I'm not mistaken, my grandfather was Cherokee and Choctaw. My grandmother was a Blackfoot. My granddaddy looked like a white man, but my grandmother was real dark. And I never did know my grandmother. She had passed before I was born. But my granddad died when I was probably a preteen, because I remember helping to take care of him, but he died of colon cancer. But I didn't know that until one of my dad's brother died of colon cancer. So eventually my father died of colon cancer and another brother died of colon cancer. And it was passed on to me, but they got my polyps out before it actually turned to cancer. And that's the only thing I really know about my father's parents. My daddy eventually owned a small portion of land, and he built the house himself. He did the plumbing and electrical work and made cabinets and stuff like that for our house. It was in a we ended up in a flood area, so the government actually bought the house from my parents. Even they were divorced later. So on my mother's side, I knew her parents, my grandfather and my grandmother. They had a farm, cows, chicken, hogs, pigs. I don't remember goats, but they had animals, chickens, because there was a hen house. There was an outhouse. There was a smokehouse. There was a sorghum mill. My grandfather grew cotton and sorghum, potatoes, peanuts, beans, corn, watermelons. They ate off the land. And that's something I looked forward to on Sundays, because we normally would come out here to my grandparents on Sundays. My grandmother was the best cook I've ever known. And she would have biscuits in the stove. They had a wood burning stove. And she would have 2-day-old biscuits, and they were still good. Sweet potatoes. I mean, rice. But she cooked, because the children, when they got old enough, they followed my grandfather to the field. My mom was the oldest, so she was brought up like a boy, because she was the oldest and she had to help my grandfather. I was, a few years ago, just told that my grandfather, my mom, and her sister next to her helped them build their house. It was not a very large house. Like I said, they had 12 children, but there was only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 rooms. And like I said, they had an outhouse. It was, I may have been almost a teenager before they actually got a bathroom in the house and a bathtub. But they had several acres of land. And I'm really proud of my grandfather for not allowing white people to take his land. Now, I had an aunt to tell me a little while back that the only time she knows of that my grandfather lost in the land was one year he didn't have enough money to pay the taxes on the land. So he went to a man and asked to borrow some money. And the man said, yeah, I'll let you borrow the money, but you're going to have to give me some of your land. She didn't tell me how much he gave him, but he had to give him part of the land and pay him back his money. And as of now, we have, I think it's over 120 acres out here. I do live out here, and I have an uncle and 4 aunts that live out here also. But it's yet in the Richardson's name. And I'm out here because my mother's deceased, and I asked if I could move a mobile home out here on a portion, and of course they allowed me to. I don't remember very many people that actually influenced me when I was young, because I don't remember. I remember negative stuff about my childhood. I don't remember, much positivity. I remember my daddy being a weekend drunk. Like I said, he had good jobs, but he would come home drunk, and that affected me a whole lot. Um, like I said, my dad always had good jobs, but he would drink on the weekends. And my grandfather actually sold um, whiskey, Skull Cat, whichever one. He probably made it also because he had a sawger mill and grew his own sugar cane. But I remember a lady that lived next door to us when I was a toddler. She and her husband didn't have any children. I remember we called him Uncle Tom and his wife, Miss Mary, if I'm not mistaken. And they would take me and my sister next to me to Canton, Mississippi in this summertime with them. So that was an influence on me. I was always quiet, introverted, and when we would gather, I was always off to myself. So I didn't really associate with uh, my a lot of my mom's sisters and brother were younger than me. I'm the oldest grandchild, but I was the studious type. I would be reading a magazine or book or something while they were out playing. But I had a lot of positive teachers, that were a big influence on me, and they were all females. I didn't have a male teacher until I got in high school. But I thank God none of my relatives that I could find out were ever slaves. I don't know of on either side. I don't think they were ever sharecroppers. From what I know, everyone did well. My grandfather, I don't remember him ever working, but I'm sure he worked. I just don't remember. But we all grew up pretty well. I never experienced any racism that I can remember. It's not that Grenada was not racist, and it still is. Thank you.